Welcome back, Wolfpack. Verlisify, and this is how to use Butterfree and Beedrill. So I was thinking, since I'm just kind of bringing the quality back on some of these older how to use videos, I might as well just pair off some of the ones that are very similar, and that'll give us a better video overall instead of like a 3-minute, this Pokemon doesn't do much, see you guys tomorrow kind of idea. But with this, let's go and break down the stats of Butterfree, and yeah, we don't really have much. After looking at the nice shiny stats of all the starter Pokemon, it drops off pretty quick because Butterfree is going to be one of, or at least like Caterpie in the evolutionary line, it's going to be one of the first Pokemon that you encounter, and you can't overload it with stats or else your gameplay is going to be very easy. But at the same time, 90 is our highest base stat. That's not a lot, and then we have 70 on the speed. So we have no tankiness whatsoever, but we have the speed of a tankier Pokemon. It's just very middling and doesn't really get much accomplished. 45 attack, we're not going to be using that. 50 on defense, 80 on special defense, and 60 on the hit points. Pretty much we're about as tanky as we look. We're a butterfly. We're very, very frail and very, very delicate, and we also don't intimidate much or do a lot of damage. When we switch it over to Beedrill, actually, Beedrill isn't much different. Again, we have 90 as our highest stat, and the stats are very similar to Butterfree, just a little different, that we have 40 on that defense, 80 on the special defense, 75 on the speed, and 65 on the hit points. So actually, our base stats are a little better in the relevant areas. Like, we're slightly faster, and we have slightly more hit points. At the same time, like, nothing on that special attack. And we have, 90 on the attack. I was like, decent, but 90 attack isn't even decent anymore. Looking at the typings, well, with Butterfree, I've already used Frail before, but I think Frail is about right when you look at all those weaknesses of a bug flying type. We resist as, like, grass and bug and fighting and stuff, and we also get the ground immunity, but even then, like, we're not durable at all, so using that as a switch-in or some kind of tanky opportunity isn't really going to work out, and we have a lot of weaknesses. Pretty much our opponent is going to find a way of hitting us super effective at some point, because flying, rock, fire, electric, and ice, and hopefully it isn't a rock, is pretty much how we're looking at it. So I can already tell you this right now, Focus Sash is pretty much a must. Looking at Beedrill, Beedrill is a bug poison typing, a bit more resistances off of that poison, and then we also do have a little less weakness on that just as well, because flying, rock, fire from our bug, and then we have poison, giving us that weakness to psychic. Fortunately, the bug resistance to ground also kind of helps us out with the poison. That's kind of it. So you have to worry about psychic, which is pretty unusual. Like, it's one of those things where you don't see psychic being used offensively that much, just for those super effective coverages, but overall, we still have a lot of weaknesses, and again, we're very frail, so hopefully it isn't a physical hit, and hopefully we're not going to be caught, you know, in some really bad situations. Hopping into Pokemon Showdown, Butterfree actually starts looking decent. Like, you can imagine with those stats, absolutely worthless, but at the same time, it gets Quiver Dance, one of the strongest moves in the entire game, and here's why. Quiver Dance raises special attack, special defense, and speed by 1, so you gain 3 stat boosts in 1 turn. That is an overloaded move if I've ever seen one, and we also have the Compound Eyes ability. Accuracy multiplied by 1.3 times. Hey, we also get Sleep Powder. So Sleep Powder with Compound Eyes is going to be very close to Spore. That it's like, what, 97, 98% accuracy. Very rarely will it miss on that Sleep Powder. And that's just going to be good news for you because, alright, Focus Sash. So we get blown up, we survive on that Compound Eyes, and then we can go for a Quiver Dance, outspeed the opponent, land that Sleep Powder, and then we're good to go. Unless your opponent has priority. If your opponent has priority, sleep comes first, then you Quiver Dance, and then cool things happen. Breaking down these stats. This is where the 70 speed really sucks. And I mean, I've talked about all the other Quiver Dances at some point because of the How to Use series, and Butterfree being one of the slower ones doesn't really help out. Also, it doesn't get access to Hurricane, so that's where we see Vivillon. If you're thinking about using a Quiver Dance Butterfly Pokemon, just go for Vivillon because it's going to have that better coverage. It's just going to play out better overall. So let's go and pull it off. And right here we can see that off the bat, you know, 89 speed. Okay, and since our defenses don't really matter, we do have the same amount of special attack, but we do get a stronger stab move compared to the Butterfree. When we're looking at Butterfree, what do we have? Air Slash, right? No, we don't get Air Slash, and then we also surely don't get the Hurricane. So that really limits us to pretty much Bug Buzz for stab, and then Energy Ball just to kind of throw in a coverage thing there. Just Water-type Pokemon, Ground-type Pokemon. Let's go and find some hits in there. Rock-type Pokemon, because they were really threatening us to begin with. So that's kind of what we're looking at, and also our speed isn't that great. So 70 on the base speed, that's going to pull us into a 134, which means we're going to have 201 speed at level 50. So we're going to barely outspeed 130 base speed Pokemon. After that, we get outsped by 135, so that means a Mega Manectric comes in, Thunderbolts us even after our setup, and we're going to go down because we are very frail. Looking at this, we also have Butterfree's other moves, Psychic and Shadow Ball. So, if Energy Ball doesn't tickle your fancy, you can run Psychic or Shadow Ball, and that's kind of it. However, for a fun fact, let's go and pull up the Mewtwo. Mewtwo does have that 130 speed, so if you're not going up against a Mega Mewtwo, just a regular old Mewtwo, he hits you, blows you up, you survive on that Focus Sash, and then you can turn it around and land a Bug Buzz onto the Mewtwo for the KO. So technically in the 1v1, unless Mewtwo has a Focus Sash, I guess you're going to win. Actually, no, even then, because you have the Sleep Powder. So Mewtwo hits you, you go for the Quiver Dance, you outspeed on the Sleep Powder, you hit them Focus Sash, they have a small chance of waking up, and then you hit them on another one, and then you can call it GG right there. Actually, that does even give you a chance against the Mega Mewtwo X, and maybe even it depends on Mega Mewtwo Y as well, so don't give up on your Butterfree just yet, depending on how the Focus Sash ends up playing out, but because of that, you will have to avoid entry hazards. And then one last thing before we move on to the Beedrill, just kind of showing like we need super effective hits and we need the opponent to be asleep for 2 turns, but after that, you know, it kind of compounds on itself that if you're outspeeding, you know, you pick up the 2 hits, or you get a KO, well, now you're faster already. You got your setup in. As long as they don't have priority, you put them to sleep, and then you try to 2-hit them again, and then you try to 2-hit them again. It does show that Butterfree does have that sweeping potential, but it can get outsped by Scarf. It can be dealt with by priority, so there is a lot of risk involved, but it can still pull off a pretty fancy Butterfly sweep. Now, the interesting thing is that Alakazam, you don't see it too often because it feels like it ever falls just slightly behind on damage. Like if you hit a strong Psychic, it's not going to have enough to neutrally KO a lot of Pokemon, and Butterfree feels the same problems, even though Alakazam has more special attack. So 175 base special attack, uninvested, is actually going to be more after Butterfree puts in work on that Quiver Dance. Let's move over to Beedrill and talk about that for a second. So Beedrill gets a massive 145 base speed. You can play it how you want. You can either run it with a Jolly nature or just go with the Adamant. Adamant means that you aren't going to find crazy amounts of outspeed, so let's go and pull up a Pokemon like Talonflame. Talonflame is going to be like one of those borderline situations. Now here's the thing. Talonflame in theory already just goes Gale Wings and then blows you up anyway, so it kind of doesn't matter. But when we're looking at the speed threshold, so say we drop this down to level 50, we go and we boost up the speed some more, and then we slap down like a Jolly Nature or whatever, you know, that's a 195 compared to the 197. So that's kind of what we're looking at with the Beedrill, but that means we outspeed Greninja, we outspeed Noivern on Pokemon like the Beedrill. And that could play into things. You know, you want Beedrill as a late game sweeper. If a lot of your opponent's Pokemon have taken residual damage, or they just are weak to the Poison Jab, X's, or Knockoff, things can start working out really well for you. Problem is, though, you're almost forced to run Protect unless you want to be a risky son of a gun. Because here's the thing, you Mega Evolve, and on the turn you Mega Evolve, you don't have that 145 base speed. You still have that crummy 75 base speed from the regular Beedrill, because speed activates the turn after, or like, all the speed calculation for the turn is done when the turn begins, not during the turn, so that way you just set up your Protect, and then you can outspeed and try to lay down the damage. Cool thing is, Beedrill has the adaptability, so it's going to have pretty much super effective hits, like non-stab super effective hits on everything. Poison Jab, that does double damage. X's are double damage. Knockoff, well, not quite, but 1.5 times damage, so effective stab. It's like having Protean in its own way, if they do hold an item, which is most Pokemon except for Megas. And then you can just kind of carry out your coverage from there. Interestingly enough, Beedrill also gets, I just have regular Beedrill, just kind of give it some lip service, but at the same time we have Fell Stinger, U-Turn, and Drill Run as other options. Drill Run actually gives you ground type coverage, so if you are being crazy, you could get rid of that Protect and you could throw in the Drill Run, and that means your coverage now kind of goes up. You know, you can hit Steel type Pokemon a lot more effectively, you can hit Rock type Pokemon a lot more effectively, and even with those super effective hits, yeah, Adamant 150, that's pretty hefty, especially when you're hitting super effectives, so that's going to open up a couple more KO opportunities for you, but you are losing on that Protect, which does put you in some very, very scary ranges. And then we can also see that Beedrill gets access to the U-Turn. I'll see people run the U-Turn. I personally do not like it because you're just cutting out damage. You know, you're dropping 70 base power, so you're actually, after everything applies, you know, you're losing 20 total base power because the 10 difference, but then adaptability is doubling that. So 20... Not on Beedrill, man, because Beedrill, when it goes Mega, look at Mega Beedrill, 80 defense and 40 special defense with the 65 hit points, it is not going to accomplish anything. It is going to die to almost any neutral hit that it sees, and even though it does have a couple resistances, still not the best thing to deal with. So we can look at the regular Beedrill, also gets Fell Stinger. Now, Fell Stinger is one of the most high-risk, high-reward moves I've ever seen on any Pokemon, including Beedrill, because look at this, raises your attack by 2 if you KO the target, but only has 30 base power, and like only 60 even after your adaptability comes into play. So you need a super low Pokemon scenario, you need to set it up perfectly, but you come in with that Fell Stinger, well bam, now you're actually going to be able to KO a lot of things, because doubling the attack on the adaptability into a Poison Jab, into an X-Scissor, this is where the neutral hits will massively pay off, and that's where Beedrill can sweep as long as it doesn't find anything like outspeeds or really spooky things that it has to worry about. But that's kind of limitations of Beedrill. So very high glass cannon sweeper kind of Pokemon, but at the same time it doesn't, even with the adaptability, it's like slightly behind on damage. You know, it's going to find very powerful neutral KOs. Also, it is going to be very susceptible to Will-O-Wisp. So if bulky Pokemon survives it, hits the Will-O-Wisp, GG. Bulky Pokemon comes in, it has a Rocky Helmet, so Beedrill, you know, it doesn't do a lot of damage. Beedrill takes a lot of recoil and gets finished off by a cheap hit. So I think that's pretty much everything when it comes to Beedrill and Butterfree. They both have their highs, but it's kind of outclassed by the lows. Beedrill, you only get 1 Mega per battle. Sometimes it's worth it, most of the time it isn't, and then Butterfree, you know, you use up a Focus Sash to try to get some kind of crazy Quiver Dance sweep that a lot of other Quiver Dance Pokemon are capable of, but Butterfree does bring its own things to the table that make it a little more interesting. So if you guys enjoyed the video, hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.